Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thursday, November 4th, year 2021. And this is the second episode of a new series that we're doing called Bruce Ivins is Innocent. The script is going to be sticking to what's been written in some readily available publications from mainstream sites. By the way, my name is Mark Kulak, Kulacz, and it's my little show, Houstonic Live. I'm an analyst, worked in the tech industry for a while as an engineer and a competitive analyst, and I do a show on research and analysis of historical current events, trying to bring them together to bring a little bit of context and understanding to what is going on. Today, we are going to be referring to at least one, we may make it through two articles. And these articles are from the year 2010, 2011. This one is from 2011, the Frontline PBS one. There's also one from the New York Times, which I think was 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Just going to be focusing on reading in these articles for you. And these articles are interviews of some people who knew Bruce Ivins. But one person in particular that this article focuses on. This article here discusses four people. I think four people are interviewed. Three are longtime colleagues. And then there's a Dr. Nancy Haigwood, Haigwood, who was a 400-something publications running the primate lab up in Oregon State. And it was her testimony, her statements, which were a big part of the negative portrayal of Dr. Bruce Ivins, the man who is accused of being the lone wolf, the singular bad actor in the world behind the Amerithrax. No one else was involved, according to the official narrative, other than Bruce Ivins. No one at USAMRIID, no one at a foreign country, no corporation, not the defense, not Homeland Security, not a Democrat or Republican, just one man. Because supposedly he was upset about something, and he might have had some jealousy over a female sorority. I'll let you make up your own opinion about that, but we're just going to read their statements. So, without any further ado, let us just dive right in and start reading this October 10th, 2011 article, PBS. This is the public broadcasting system. This is public television, taxpayer funded for those who do not live in the United States. And one of their main news expose programs is a show called Frontline, which has been running for many, many, many years. I've always thought Frontline was excellent. I think most people would agree that at least one point they thought Frontline was a premier news journalism research piece. However, even the stuff right now, I must admit off the cuff here, that in the past that I thought was excellent, even that seems as though it may have had an angle to it. But that's not for this show. And here's the article. So again, the first, I think, two or three people that are interviewed are longtime colleagues that are not Nancy Haigwood. The Nancy Haigwood interview, or her thoughts on Dr. Bruce Ivins, are the longest. It's almost half the article length, if I'm not mistaken. Written by Sarah Moughthy, Moughty. Some of Dr. Bruce Ivins' former colleagues at the United States Army Medical Research Institute for Infectious Diseases, typically said as USAMRIID, remember Dr. Ivins as a goofball scientist and a practical joker. But one former grad school colleague saw what she described as Ivins', quote, dark side, unquote. Here are excerpts from their PBS Frontline interviews. So this is Colonel W. Russell Byrne, Byrne, MD, doctor at USAMRIID. Dr. Byrne says, I would have met Dr. Bruce Ivins, or him, sometime in April of 1993. Now remember, the anthrax attacks, the anthrax letters were October 2001. Possibly might have been a little planning a couple weeks before that, but let's just say October 2001. And Dr. Bruce Ivins was identified as the primary suspect in late or fall of 2006, and he committed suicide in the summer of 2008. So this Dr. Byrne says, I would have met Dr. Bruce Ivins, him, sometime in April of 1993. My first real encounter with Bruce was kind of indirect when he complained about the first animal protocol with plague that I had run. He described it as a runaway train. You risk your life every time you walk into the BSL-3 suites. And it's not just what you do that can get you into trouble. If somebody else doesn't run an experiment right, if you walk into a lab or somebody else is vortexing a specimen or something that could be aerosolized, people want to know about that because they can inhale them. I had this experiment going, and I forgot what his specific complaint was, but I remember thinking he was pretty intense. And then, as I got to know him, he had a hair-trigger sense of humor about him. I could kid him about practically anything, and he'd find a way to keep the joke going. That's kind of the person that I knew. The interviewer asks, well, like what kind of a joke? And Dr. Byrne responds, his lunges were kind of bizarre, and I don't even remember exactly what was in it. I remember him juggling. This was in the division office, and the secretary's desk is there, and she's behind it. And my office is a little office right next to it. There's a door right there. And he starts juggling in front of it. Then he gets down and he ends up juggling on his back. To me, he was much more of a kind of a Dick Van Dyke character. He saw things as being funny a lot of the time. And he also knew that he was funny. He also knew he was comical. That's the person I knew. He cared a lot about his work. He ran down details. He checked things out. He took things very seriously. Interviewer asks, that was his reputation in general. Dr. Byrne responds, well, that was my experience with him. I can't say that's exactly what everybody thought. I just don't know. I never had any complaints about him while I was the chief. The interviewer asks, you describe a guy who has a humor trigger. Did he also have a temper trigger? Dr. Byrne responds, no, I never saw him angry. He was very intense at certain times, but I never saw him angry. The interviewer asks, how did he show his intensity? And Dr. Byrne responds, he would speak faster and he would just look more intense. It wouldn't be the smiling kind of joking guy. I think he always spoke pretty rapidly. He would speak more rapidly, and maybe because I was not only his boss, I wouldn't see a more intense side than that, but that's what I did see. Interviewer asks, you belong to his church. How involved was he? And Dr. Byrne responds, he was the music director at the 9 a.m., the 9 o'clock in the morning mass. He referred to it as the hippie mass, and other people referred to it as the happy, clappy mass. It was very energetic. His wife sang. I enjoyed it a lot. He would get people clapping and going along with it, and you could see people kind of moving from side to side. This was usually on the last song. He would bring in these old Negro spirituals or something like that. He always kind of fired things up at the end, and I really enjoyed that. And the interviewer asks, was the Bruce Ivins that the FBI described during the press conference after his death the same Bruce Ivins that you knew? And Dr. Byrne responds, they seem to harp on that he was a loner. He was not a loner. He had a lot of friends. The first-year anniversary and the second-year anniversary of his death, 20 or 30 people got together from the division. He was not a loner. He might have been a gregarious introvert, maybe, but he was very outgoing. The second person interviewed, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Adamovics. Colonel Adamovic says, I became Bruce's boss in 2001 when I became the deputy division chief, and I supervised Bruce for a time, for a couple of years. And then I became the chief of the division. Then I no longer supervised Dr. Bruce Ivins directly, but he was a pleasure to work with. He's a somewhat animated, very eccentric person. But he was a very productive scientist. In a matter of discussion about science, I listened very closely to what Bruce had to say. He was a key person in the field, and he was well respected by everybody in the lab. At the same time, of course, Bruce was kind of a quirky personality that would put some people off at times. But my interactions with him were always good, whether I was his supervisor or not. Whether in the work setting or in a social setting, I always enjoyed being around Bruce. Interviewer asks, what do you mean by quirky nature? Dr. Adamovic responds, Bruce is probably antithetical to the typical scientist personality in a sense that Bruce is playful. He likes to tell jokes. He likes to talk to people. He would keep candy in his desk office to entice people to come into the office so they could talk. He enjoyed following weather patterns and weather systems and discussing it in the morning, about what the weather was going to be that day. He juggled. He played musical instruments. He played the guitar. He wrote poems for people when they left the Institute, or if there was a special occasion, such as a Christmas party, that sort of thing. But he was very outgoing sort of guy. He didn't care about very materialistic things. He didn't dress well. He didn't drive a nice car. He didn't focus or talk about money at all. So he was a different person. The interviewer asks, did the quirkiness go beyond what people would expect so that some people wondered whether he was emotionally stable or not? Dr. Adamovic responds, answering a question about Bruce's emotional stability is very difficult because I think there were probably changes in Bruce's personality over time. When I met Bruce in 1995, he was a person that you wouldn't think of as having emotional problems. Sometimes after 9/11, I think Bruce began to change in certain ways, in the sense that as the pressure at the Institute increased to deal with these attacks and to deal with the samples that were coming in, I think that was a source of stress for Bruce and for all of us. Clearly, though, his personality fundamentally changed, I would say, along about 2006, after he became the quote-unquote prime suspect, and it was clear that the FBI was focusing on him. He did not deal with that stress very well at all. The interviewer asks, in the early days, did Dr. Bruce Ivins have a temper? Dr. Adamovic, again, who's an ex-boss of Bruce Ivins, responds, I never saw Bruce exhibit any forms of temperament or anger. He would speak in a very animated way about certain topics, but I never saw him display anger. In fact, one of the things I was proud of Bruce is that we had a problem employee in the Institute, and this was an employee who has put his hands on people and was a very aggressive personality. That's Mr. Sina Bavari. He had shoved Bruce up against a filing cabinet one day, and Bruce came and told me about it, but he didn't really want to make a big deal out of it. Clearly, he wasn't the type of person to engage any kind of a physical altercation. He wasn't aggressive in his personality. The interviewer asks, did Bruce show signs of being afraid of the FBI? Off the record, I would say I would be freaking terrified of the FBI. Dr. Adamovic responds, Bruce was very afraid of the FBI. I believe they knew this was having an adverse effect on him, but it was, in their minds, the desired effect. Bruce and I had several conversations about the stress he was feeling. This was around late 2006 and early 2007. I advised him to seek legal help because it was clear to me this was something more than routine at this point. But Bruce did retain a lawyer. Bruce clearly felt, a lot of stress and anxiety over the FBI. In fact, he had mentioned to me one time that, quote, it doesn't matter whether I did it or not. They're going to convict me of it, unquote. That's the kind of thoughts that were probably going through Bruce's head at this time. The interviewer asks, some say that Bruce was just a really good liar. What are your thoughts? Dr. Adamovic responds, do we ever really know somebody completely? It's possible. Bruce could have been the master deceiver, although knowing him personally, I can't imagine how he could pull that off. Bruce didn't seem to be capable of deceiving people because he was just too outgoing. In other words, if you wanted a secret to get spread across the Institute, you told the secret to Bruce. And you told him specifically to keep it a secret. And sure enough, it would get out because Bruce couldn't keep a secret. So there's this juxtaposition between how the FBI represents Dr. Bruce Ivins, the Bruce I knew, as this clever mastermind manipulating liar, and the person that we knew that couldn't keep a secret. They're just not the same person. And again, I'm still firmly held in my belief that he had nothing to do with this. And this is a longtime boss of his and a longtime friend. Third person, Henry Hain. Oh, I should have practiced how to pronounce this last name. Hain. I'm just gonna say Dr. Henry. Okay, I don't want to mispronounce this good doctor's last name. Dr. Henry, also a PhD at USAMRIID. Dr. Henry starts off by saying, Bruce was one of the senior scientists in the Division of Bacteriology at USAMRIID when I arrived in December of 1998. Bruce was just wonderful right from day one. Bruce, I would consider one of the godfathers in this area. And so here you have somebody, and you're new, and he comes in and says, quote, anything you need, if you need some help from me, ask me. I can help you out in any way whatsoever, unquote. Just invited me into his world, as it were. He was a very congenial scientist, very smart and brilliant, really knew his science and very dedicated. And at the same time, also very dedicated to mentoring and helping out new scientists, young scientists coming in. The Bruce Ivins that's been described to the FBI and so forth, I never met that person. And I wouldn't hope, and I hope I never do. The person I knew was a good scientist, and then as the years went by, developed also into what I would like to believe was a very good friendship. The interviewer asks, you mentioned that you guys would go up to your cabin. Dr. Henry asks, we kind of tongue-in-cheek always describe these, quote, bacteriology militia weekends, unquote. We would go up to my place in West Virginia, usually get up there late on a Friday evening. First thing, obviously, is we'd go out and we hit the local bar. Then we come back to the cabin and sleep it off. And then the next morning, after everybody was sober, because I have a very, very strict set of rules about alcohol and firearms, we do a lot of shooting. We had a small target range set up there, and everybody could bring up whatever they had and do a little target practicing, something that's kind of hard to do, when you live down in the metropolitan areas. I don't really believe that Bruce had any guns until he started doing that with us, because the first time he came up, he didn't have any, and he was, of course, using everyone else's. Then on subsequent trips, he started showing up with his own, and they were brand new guns. He was a terrible shot. We used to joke with him, and again, when he wasn't present, about how he couldn't hit the side of a barn if he was standing right next to it. He didn't know how to shoot properly. We tried to work with him on it, but he wasn't very proficient with firearms at all. The interviewer asks, did he ever talk about women or his obsession with the sorority? Dr. Henry asks, I never heard them as obsessions, the way they were presented. I did hear the story, which is the foundation for all of this, which was that when he was an undergraduate, he had gone to a party with a young lady who was a member of that particular sorority, as it turned out. And after a period of time, she kind of excused herself to go to the bathroom or something, and then never came back. The interviewer asks, where did you hear that story? Dr. Henry says, that was from Bruce. Interviewer asks, why would Bruce bring it up? Dr. Henry says, I don't even remember the context for it. I don't remember the exact date and time, but I remember where it was. It was in what we refer to as the CAC, the Community Activity Center there at Fort Detrick, which was a favorite place for all of us to go after work at least once a week. And I can remember we were all sitting around the table, probably telling war stories from college, is what I think the context was. And that was his college war story. Wow. I must, narrator's note here. That's pretty sad. Okay. I shouldn't, it's sad. But that's your college war story. I went with a girl to a party. She went to the bathroom and I didn't see her again. I'm telling you what, most people have a far more serious story than that, if that's what actually happened. Let's get back. Interviewer asks, did he seem to talk about the sorority in any way, either in respectful ways or in anger? And Dr. Henry finishes up by saying, no. He just mentioned that she had been in a sorority. Didn't even mention which sorority it was, just mentioned sorority. Again, I can't recall all the specifics of it, except that I do know we were kind of telling war stories. Quote, I was in a fraternity, my wife is in a sorority, unquote. So I think it probably all kind of centered around those kinds of stories. That, that quote, oh yeah, I dated somebody in this sorority, unquote, and so forth. So Bruce's contribution was, quote, well, I went out with this girl and she left me, unquote, sort of thing. And that was the end of it. Okay. So there you have, there's the first three. Now comes the last one. Now comes the ugliness, if you will. Dr. Nancy Haigwood, PhD, graduate school colleague. Well, first off, okay, let's look at this, okay? This is USAMRIID. Dr. Henry USAMRIID. The previous person, USAMRIID, okay? USAMRIID, all right? So she's described as a graduate school colleague. Graduate school colleague. Well, she was not in graduate school. She had her PhD is in the early 1980s, first off, okay? This interview is in 2008, 2009? She had been a doctor for over 20 years. She was already published all around the world. She had been working through HIV research with Gallo and Nowinski and Corey and Fauci since 1986 and well before then. She was published in the New York Times. But she's described here as and you think, oh, young little girl, mean man, which happens, by the way. That does happen. I can't tell you how many female friends that I've known that have confessed about sick men who would grope them and stuff like that. That stuff does happen, and I don't mean to belittle it, but this is how it's being portrayed here. Graduate school colleague. Bruce Ivins is 58, by the way. Actually, he's I think he was almost 60 when he is said to have committed suicide. Nancy Haigwood, graduate school colleague. Dr. Haigwood starts off. I went to graduate school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And when I met Bruce and his wife, I was a graduate school student, and he was a new postdoc who had just arrived to work with Dr. Priscilla Wyrick, W-Y-R-I-C-K. I met him casually, as all new people do, just dropped by the lab. How you doing? Welcome. That kind of a thing. I had a casual friendship with him that's typical of scientists from different laboratories. Now, first thing I must say as an editor's note, Dr. Bruce Ivins didn't go to UNC. I don't understand how this happened. He went to Cincinnati, and then he went to USAMRIID. I don't understand how this relationship, this friendship was blossomed. But again, let's get back. Let's just stick to what they're saying here. The interviewer asks, what was he like? Dr. Haigwood says, he was a high-energy guy, very interested in engaging with other people, seemed quite interested in his science, and a serious scientist, but with a fun streak to him. The interviewer asks, his reputation at that point of the work he was doing, the kind of intellect he had and such. And Dr. Haigwood says, oh, certainly very bright. I didn't know much about it because I was studying something quite different from what his area was. So I wasn't that familiar with the specifics. But certainly the caliber of students and fellows at UNC at that time were quite good and still is. And he seemed to fit in scientifically. He was a bit of an odd duck, though. that showed up in a few more months in what he persistently, friendly in a way, in that he was persistently friendly. He was persistently friendly in a way that scientists typically are not. We tend to be pretty contained with our own little scientific issue and typically within our own laboratories. The interviewer asks, but he was different. How? How did it show up? And Dr. Haigwood responds, it's so hard to describe. I know I've talked about it before over the years. It wasn't unpleasant. It was just a little too persistent. It was just a little bit odd. It seemed as though Bruce wanted more attention than what he was getting. And the interviewer says, so what kind of interactions would you have with him? Did you work together? And Dr. Haigwood says, no, we never worked together. Again, this is a very casual sort of drop by the lab kind of, hi, how you doing type of interaction. Probably it must have been 4 years. I believe I was in graduate school about 5 years, and he arrived and left during that time. So the specific dates, I don't remember exactly, but I believe he certainly left Chapel Hill before I did. Interviewer asks, what was the nature of what he wanted out of the relationship with you? And Dr. Haigwood responds, I think he was generally looking for friends at University of North Carolina, but he specifically seems to have latched onto me because of my association with Kappa Kappa Gamma, which was my sorority in college. And it's actually called a fraternity, but it is a sorority. And KKG, it's Kappa Kappa Gamma, was a sorority that Bruce had developed a strong interest in. His whole demeanor kind of lit up when he found I was a KKG person. I happened to be also the faculty or graduate mentor to that chapter at Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina at that time. So I was involved in Kappa Kappa Gamma while I was a graduate student. He seemed to take an inordinate interest in it. And I remember at one point saying, Bruce, this is just way beyond the bounds. I don't want to talk about this anymore, unquote. But later, of course, it came out that he had a long-standing interest in Kappa Kappa Gamma, where he had gone to college. So it seemed to have retained what appears to have been some kind of an obsession with Kappas. And if you asks why, and Dr. Haigwood says, I have no idea. There's been speculation, but I really don't know. So the interviewer asks, what kind of things would he want to talk about? And Dr. Haigwood says, he wanted to know what's the secret cipher? And can you talk more about it? What was it like? What was your chapter like? He seemed to just want to drill down and kind of get into the specifics, which are irrelevant, in my view, to any man, let alone any woman who's not in that particular sorority. It's a wonderful way to get to know other women, and we had a few secret rituals, and that was a kind of a fun thing to do in college. And I certainly value my Kappa sisters and my experience there. But it's not something I would ever share, and he seemed to just be wanting to be very intrusive. And the interviewer asks, so his interest in you in a relationship was not romantic? And Dr. Haigwood says, oh no, not at all. The interviewer asks, it was almost more to find out information about the sorority? Dr. Haigwood says, I think so. I mean, I'm a pretty friendly person. People will tell you that I have been my whole life, so I was probably on the friendlier side of a typical scientist. And it came to be that very few other people were friends at all with Bruce, and I continued to be friendly. But that's it. Interviewer asks, why did he have a problem finding other friends? Dr. Haigwood responds, I think he just had an unusual personality traits. Again, it's very hard to describe, but Bruce could be very annoying. And the interviewer says, can you tell me more how he was annoying? And Dr. Haigwood says, I think that one word comes to mind is obsequious. Obviously, I didn't get an A in English. Obsequious. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry. I'm messing that up. He tended to be just wanting to garner praise and wanting to overdo conversations in a way that people just eventually were turned off by that. And the interviewer says, the way it's been reported is this obsession with you became bigger and bigger and lasted many, many years. What's your take on it? The psychological report basically says that you became a defining character in his life. And Dr. Haigwood says, it was always puzzling to me. He seemed to maintain regular contact. By that, I mean the early sort of Christmas card level type of contact over the years. And yet, at the same time, there were some very disturbing incidents that happened to me as a graduate student and when I had my first job in Maryland, one in Chapel Hill and one in Maryland. Both of these events were very disturbing. I'll describe them to you, but I was suspicious that there was no one else who could have done anything like that to me except for Bruce. Bruce was the only oddball in my life, and I confronted him about these events, and he denied having done them. And later, I learned from the FBI that he had, in fact, been the perpetrator. A little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. What came first? Her stories or the FBI? I'm not quite sure. Each one says the other one came first, but that's me. Not reading the script here. Let's just keep going on. So the interviewer says, one of them is the attack on your fiance's home. Dr. Haigwood says, yes. I came home from work one day to discover that the fence outside of our home and the car that belonged to my fiance had been spray painted with red paint with Kappa Kappa Gamma. And of course, when I saw Kappa Kappa Gamma, my first thought was, it was Bruce Ivins. We reported it to the police right away, and they asked us who might have done this. And I said I suspected that a former colleague of mine from graduate school might have been the person involved. I don't think there was ever an investigation about it. Certainly no conviction of any kind. I wonder if there's even a police report. What do you think triggered it? Asked the interviewer. Dr. Haigwood says, desire for attention? I think Bruce wanted to let me know that he was in the area, which I did know. He was working at Frederick. This is Maryland at the time. And this was in Gaithersburg, Maryland. That certainly brought my attention to the fact that he was close by. And the way it was done was so very meticulous, which is also not the way someone who is simply out to prank might do it. In other words, the spray paint on the back window of the Honda sedan was done in such a way that there was no extra paint. It was clearly on the glass so that it could be easily repaired and scraped off. So there was no actual long-term damage, just annoyance. Okay. I'm breaking from the script here. I'm breaking from the script, and I say this as someone who's from a police family, okay? If anyone ever reports that their car had been spray painted on and no spray paint got onto the body, that is almost 100% of the time that person spray painted their own car. This happens so many times, I cannot tell you. So many times. Something horrible painted on the car, it's on the windshield, you take the pictures, it makes the news, and then you wipe it off. It's gone. It needs to, if it doesn't bleed onto the fenders, if it's not soaking into the gaskets, that means that it was that person. And they just wanted the attention, and they wanted it to go away, and they wanted the car to stay clean. They didn't want to lose value when they traded it in for the next model. I cannot tell you how many times this happens. It's such a red flag. It is such a red flag. You really think you're going to graffiti someone's car, but you're going to take the extra time not to get it on the fenders and the gaskets, the door handles? You don't want to get it on the tire. No, you don't want to overspray anything else in the car. It makes no sense. You would think that someone who's smart enough to run one of the biggest primate centers studying HIV in history would be able to figure that out. But what do I know? And that intrusive kind of, I can do this to you kind of thing. And that's what started to make me uncomfortable. The interviewer says, when had been the last time that you talked to Dr. Bruce Ivins? How long had it been since you'd had correspondence? And Dr. Haigwood says that this was many years ago. I don't even remember exactly when. Oh my goodness. Where's Brett Kavanaugh? But again, This is about a once-a-year type of discussion that I may have had with him, or exchanged family letters and things like that. There were two other incidents that happened around that time that caused me to be in touch with Bruce. One was someone impersonated me in writing a letter to the Frederick newspaper, signing my name to it, and it was about hazing in fraternities, especially in my sorority. It was written in such a way that, well, of course, I didn't write the letter. Someone brought it to my attention and said, "Oh, you saw the letter? You saw your letter? Oh, I saw your letter." And I said, "I didn't write that letter. Show it to me." I called the Frederick Post. I think what's the name of the paper? And they apologized. They said, the Frederick Post, "Well, we didn't check these letters to the editor." So I called Bruce at that point. I called him and said, "I think you did this. And I don't appreciate it, Dr. Bruce Ivins." And then he denied it. But at that point, I was very irritated. I just don't actually remember which occurred first, the newspaper event or the fence and car damage. The interviewer asks, "Did you cut off your relationship with him at that point?" And Dr. Haigwood says, oh, yes. As far as I know, I never reached out to him. Now, Bruce was the kind of person who reached out to all kinds of people all the time. And he managed to find out where I was and continued to contact me over the years. I kept him at absolute arm's length, at least approach, from then on. Interviewer says, "Very, very creepy. Very creepy. So creepy." Didn't say that. He just said very, very creepy. Dr. Haigwood responds, "Yes, it was very creepy." And I haven't described the first incident, which happened while I was there attending graduate school. This is a very intense time for a graduate student because every single piece of data is critically important to one's dissertation. I was working day and night. I came in one day and my laboratory notebook was gone. This was the only copy of my data, and it was completely missing from the lab. And I was in a total panic. And I went home and received a letter in the mail from I didn't know who, saying that the notebook had been taken and that they could be found in the bottom of a post office box in Chapel Hill. It's a tiny town. There's only one main post office box. And I contacted the post office. And this was like a Friday, so I had to wait until like a Monday. But at any rate, the authorities helped me out. The Chapel Hill police helped me out. And indeed, the notebook was in the bottom of the post office box. This was, in my view, in retrospect, Bruce's first use of the post office. Narrator's note. Clearly, Bruce Ivins sent Amerithrax. He was responsible for Amerithrax and letters that killed many people and basically launched the age of bioterrorism because she lost her notebook. Clearly! It takes the entire FBI and 20,000 agents and billions of dollars to figure that out. Oh, sweet Mary, help this man. Oh, Bruce Ivins is so innocent. He's so innocent. The interviewer asks, "So you immediately thought it was Bruce?" And Dr. Haigwood says, "Well, this was the first time anything like that had happened to me, to my knowledge. And I was really quite puzzled. And I remember talking to everyone. Does anyone have any idea who it might have been?" And Bruce was not living in North Carolina at the time, so I thought, the one kook in my life that I know, which was Bruce Ivins, well, he's not there. Well, then again, as it turns out later, he had a brother living nearby. Couple of hours away. Could have been him. It could have been him. And he did do it. I know it. I didn't know it until after he died, though.
Why are you guys all silent? Something's not right. I know it's not right, okay? We don't know now, but we know. You know? We don't know, but we know. And soon, we're going to know now. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
The interviewer asks, "It seems like the antics of a lovelorn individual who just maybe thinks it's almost funny." And Dr. Haigwood says, "Oh, it wasn't the least bit funny. It was intended to be frightening." And it was. And there was no love situation whatsoever. The interviewer asks, What do you think it says about him? Dr. Haigwood says, I think this is someone, again, this is years of thinking about it, who felt very superior and underappreciated. I'm not a psychologist, but this is the kind of behavior that it looks like to me. Someone who desperately wanted to get attention, especially from people whom he says he admired. He did get my attention, but he did not get my admiration. And that must have frustrated him. But I also think there was a dark side to where he saw that he could get away with these things. And then he realized he felt omnipotent and able to do all kinds of things. And I think he moved on from there. In other words, I think he took it to the next level. And that spray paint on my car, and that missing notebook, that was the proof. I remind you that her father was an executive at AMF Corporation, which had big connections with the nuclear industry, which is where the FBI director's Robert Swamula III's father and grandfather had been working. Dr. Bruce Ivins is so innocent. That's all, everyone. Talk to you soon.